was reading for someone yesterday, and the first thing that I got was name. And I was like, oh, okay. So obviously someone's been named after this person who she hasn't been able to meet here. But I got name and then I got tattoo at the same time. And I was like, that's weird. And I'm like, normally I get them separately. So I said to the client, oh, I feel like someone's been named after someone. She's like, no. I'm like, oh, okay. And I'm like, but do you have a tattoo in memory of this person? She goes, yes. And I said, hang on, do you have her name on you? And she's like, yes. I'm like, oh, this is it.
Hi, Lauren Grace here. Welcome to the Afterlight Podcast. And I'm joined today by Jessica Lynne. Jessica is a gifted medium whose extraordinary abilities have intrigued and captivated seekers looking for connections beyond the material world. Emerging as a guiding light and a source of comfort, Jessica assists those in search of reconnecting with departed loved ones. Using her profound spiritual insight and empathic approach, Jessica Lynne has dedicated her life to bridging the gap between the living and the spirit world. She's had the honor and privilege of reading for an array of celebrities, professional athletes, musicians, and business owners. She has recently been featured on The Morning Show, 7 News, The Australian, Marie Claire, Mama, Mia, and Body and Soul, to name a few. Jessica conducts her readings online so she can connect with clients all over the world. And she's joining me today. We're going to be talking about all things mediumship. We're also going to be talking about some tips and tricks that Jessica can suggest for you if you do have sensitive children, because I'm seeing a lot of them showing up in the world, and sometimes we're just not really sure how to deal with it. And we're also going to see whether or not Jessica has some insights about what happens when we do transition from human into spirit, or back into our full spirit. So Jessica, thank you so much for being on the show. I'm excited.
Yes, I am so excited to be here. Thank you.
One of the things that I love about you, and when you look at your social media, by the way, you want to check her out on Instagram. I'll put a link to that in the show notes here. Jessica has a wicked, funny sense of humor. And I think that, I'd love to know whether or not you feel that that part of you actually really does help strengthen your connection to the spirit world.
I think that it definitely makes my readings very different to others that I've experienced. Because the kinds of spirits that I attract, like they're all quite fun. Like my readings are very, like, obviously we get to the crux of what we need to get to, but there's a lining of like humor around it, and laughter and fun and joy, and that's what I love to bring during readings. So I definitely think that my personality sort of attracts all sorts of spirits who like to have a good time.
One of the intentions I put out there is I attract those physical and non-physical in harmony with me. So it seems to me that that's exactly what's happening to you. And I love that idea because it kind of plays on the whole abundance concept where there's actually more than enough to go around. So it seems to me that maybe people are drawn to you and their loved ones are drawn to you that have that natural nature.
Oh, absolutely. I definitely agree. Like, I'm calling in my aligned clients, the ones that will resonate with me and my energy, and the same with the spirit world. So that's why the readings are so great, because it's like we're all just sort of vibing, all of us. It's like we're all just sitting in a room, like having a chat. It's really amazing. But yeah, I agree with you.
Also, for our listener at home who's not watching the YouTube, Jess has a sign above her head and it's actually perfectly centered, which I absolutely love. Thank you for doing that. And it says, I talk to dead people. So that's just like a really nice way of letting you know that Jess does have this fabulous sense of humor. So let's go back to the beginning a little bit. I'm sure you've shared your story many times, but for those who are listening now, who are learning about you and meeting you for the first time, when did you first start connecting with the spirit world? Have you always been a sensitive person?
Yes, I've always had a very strong intuition. I even from when I was a young age, I had like that really strong gut instinct. I always just sort of knew things or was aware of other people's energies. And I was really always affected. It's kind of like that empath energy. It's something that I've always sort of had in the background, I guess we could say. But it wasn't until my Nana passed away when I was about 12 that I sort of started to think about, well, there's got to be more than this. Like, there's just has to be, like, she can't just be gone. And so I started to sort of just sit there, and she actually had, she was cremated. So she had a wooden ashes box, and I used to sit with it, and I used to just put my hand on it, and I used to like basically like pat it. And then I started to like smell this really like heavy wooden smell, and it was really like a sweet wood, and I was like, this is weird. I'm like, that's not just like me sitting here and, you just get a little bit of whiff of like the wooden box. This is like filling the room. I'm like, this is really weird. So I started testing it out. I was like, I'm going to like, walk down the hall, see if I can still smell it. And I could. I'm like, this is weird. And then it would go. And then sometimes I would just, like, if it wasn't smelling at all, like I just would walk past it and I would go and touch it. And then all of a sudden the smell would come. It was bizarre. I'm like, oh my God, this is so weird. This is the way my nana's connecting with me through smell. It like freaked me out. I was like, this is crazy. And then I started to smell it when I wasn't in the house. So I'd be walking down the street and I'd get this whiff of like this wooden smell. And I'm like, oh my God, I've created a symbol. I've created something that now I know that whenever that comes on, that's her. So that was how I first started tapping into like my spirituality, was actually through that moment. But it wasn't until it was like later in my teenage years that I started to really tap into meditation, like sitting with people who are like-minded, learning from them. I was obsessed with psychic mediums. So I would go to any sort of mind, body, spirit festival. I would be seeing all the mediums. And it wasn't until one day where a medium said to me, Jess, you should be able to turn this on and off like a light switch. You should be on the other side of this table. And I was like, oh, really? I'm like, I would love that, but kind of how? Kind of thing. And we
Yeah.
sort of left it and I just contemplated for a little while. And then I ended up seeing another medium who I loved because she was super direct. She would just like say it how it is, so accurate. And then she said she does courses and like she was doing this workshop. And I was like, hell yeah, I'm going to that. Like, I like you. So I got my friend. I'm like, we're going. And she's like, oh my God, what the hell have we signed up for? I'm like, just go with it. And so we sat there and it was like like a Sunday, like weekend class. It was like a group thing. We're all sitting around in a crystal shop. And she was like, okay, guys, we're going to learn how to blend our energy with the spirit world. So she puts on this track, Tony Stockwell, Sitting in the Power. If anyone hasn't listened to that, you should. It's a really great way to learn how to blend your energy. So we started listening to that. And then afterwards, she's like, okay, we are going to be paired up now and you're going to connect to the spirit world and bring someone's loved one through. And we were both like, what? So we sat there and I was like trying to channel. I just closed my eyes and I was like, she's like, just tell me what you start to see, ask for someone to step forward. And I saw this man and I was like, okay, I actually feel like I can see someone. This is really crazy. And I'm very visual. Everything was visual for me at that point. But I actually saw somebody that I knew as well. And I was like, why am I seeing someone that I know? And so I started to describe the man that I knew. I was like, okay, well, he's like this and he's like that. Maybe this man's like this too. And this woman's like, oh my God, they're all the characteristics of my dad. And I'm like, oh. And then I didn't realize till later that the way that the spirit world like to connect with me is to show me people that I know or circumstances that I'm aware of that relate to the person that I'm channeling. That's one of the ways that I can pick up information. So that happened on my first go. I was like, this is like a floodgate has just opened and all this information is just flying in. Yeah. And then afterwards I said to my friend, how did you go? And she's like, all I saw was colors. And she's like, I felt like a real idiot. I'm like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. But she's more of a healer. So that's why she's seeing aura colors and stuff.
Right.
But, yeah, but she thought, oh God, I'm not a medium. It was really quite funny. But that's how it all began. Then I kept going with it and did free readings for anyone who would let me. And I had that woman as a mentor for years. And yeah, fast forward and I've got my business and I'm sitting with you.
It's so amazing. And I love that because spirit does work with people in different ways. And like you were talking about, it's almost as though you were beginning to create your little dictionary of signs and messages from spirit. I remember I did a mediumship reading one time and I'm in this person's living room in my imagination, of course. And I'm looking at on the TV, I'm like, I keep seeing like the golf, like someone's watching golf. And she goes, oh, I just moved onto the back of a golf course. I'm like, oh, okay, there we go. And it's so cool because you don't always know what it is you're seeing. And a big part of the medium, would you say, is not to judge and not to create the story when we're getting the information.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You can't, it's like you need the other person, like your client, spirit. It's like we're putting together a puzzle. And it takes a little bit. Like, you're like, I got this piece. And they're like, oh, that makes sense with that piece. I'm like, oh, right. That's what they were trying to say. Even I was reading for someone yesterday. And the first thing that I got was name. And I was like, oh, okay. So obviously someone's been named after this person who she hasn't been able to meet here. But I got name and then I got tattoo at the same time. And I was like, that's weird. And I'm like, normally I get them separately. So I said to the client, oh, I feel like someone's been named after someone. She's like, no. I'm like, oh, okay. And I'm like, but do you have a tattoo in memory of this person? She goes, yes. And I said, hang on, do you have her name on you? And she's like, yes. I'm like, oh, this is it. So sometimes it takes a little minute to like understand the pieces of
Yeah.
information, especially if they're being delivered in a way that is different to how you would normally receive it. Like I don't normally get two pieces like that. And it was because it was
Mm,
related. So I'm still learning. Like you never stop.
yeah. Yeah. Would you say that, becoming a medium and trusting your mediumship abilities and your psychic abilities is like a major test in confidence and trust within yourself?
Yes, you can't do it
Yeah.
unless you trust. It just doesn't work. And I think too, the
Yeah.
more that you trust, the more they're like, oh, okay, cool. Well, we're just going to keep it flowing. But the minute that you start to like question yourself, you start to lose your power. It all just starts to get clunky. It just doesn't flow the way that I feel like that you need it to in order to have a reading that sort of just keeps going. And that was what I
Yeah.
first found at the start. I kept saying to my mentor, my readings are too clunky. Like I just feel like it's stop, start, stop, start, stop, start. And she's like, that's because you're still building up your symbology. So the flow isn't quite there yet. But also it's
Beautiful.
confidence. It's like the minute that you go, okay, I trust that piece of information. Now I trust this. Now I trust that. It just keeps going, 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 going. So you need to have
Yes.
confidence within yourself in order to do this for sure.
Yeah, I love that. I know, so my background is radio and I went to radio broadcasting school and blah, blah, blah. So this is a long-winded way of me saying that when I was first starting my mediumship, uh, like when I was doing readings for people, I had this real need to keep talking the whole time because I was like, people have signed up for a show. I need to give them a show. And I was like, didn't want to allow for dead air because I kept thinking dead air is not a good, is not good. And then I remember my mentor said to me, Lauren, you need to be quiet. You need to like actually allow information to drop in and be quiet. You don't have to talk the whole time. And so for me, it was a big test in confidence and trust myself, but it was also a big test in being okay with space and silence and allowing information to come through in a natural way. What were some
Yeah.
of the hurdles that you had to go through as well for yourself? You're talking about, understanding that you were learning symbols and signs. Was it also about putting out your ideal client? Was it about setting boundaries with clients? Were there some hurdles that you had to kind of jump through?
Yeah, I agree with the silence.
Yeah.
It's awkward. It really is. It's hard. And
You're like,
especially too, if you've got a client who doesn't like silence and wants to talk and wants to keep it moving, you almost feel this energy of like they're trying to hurry you up. And that's really
yes.
hard. It's really hard. Even now, I find it quite difficult when I'm reading for someone and I can feel their energy. Like they're just like, yep, 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 yep. And I'm like, fuck, I'm like, slow down. I'm like, I can't go this quick. And sometimes I go, just give me a second. I'm like, hang on, I just want to feel into this. So you
Yes.
start to come up with these little phrases or sentences that actually help them know you're taking a minute without it feeling awkward because you've just gone silent. So you kind of pick up different ways to sort of work. But yeah, it's really
Yeah.
quite tricky because you're like, oh my God, hurry up, spirit, get the next piece, get the next piece.
Yeah.
So it's quite funny.
Yeah.
But you know what? With clientele, like I think at the start, you're so open and you want like you just want clients. So you're like opening your energy up to anything and everything because you just like come one, come all kind of thing. And I think
Yeah.
over time, I started to realize that that doesn't really work for me because I'm really looking for people who want closure or want guidance or are ready to hear certain things. So you start calling in your ideal client. And that's a really big thing that I had to do. And I also had to know that, um, like, it's okay to end readings that aren't working or aren't flowing. It's one of the hardest things I feel like that we have to learn to do. And it happens like, 99% of the time we're all sweet, but that 1%, Sometimes the reading's not flowing, you're not vibing, you're not picking up on the information that I feel like that they're resonating with. And it just means that, might be wrong place, wrong time. Maybe their spirits aren't blending with you well. Maybe that person and you aren't the best fit, but you have to learn to cut it, because if you continue to push, 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 you're going to lose all your confidence. You're going to whack yourself out, and then you're not going to be able to read for someone else. So you kind of have to trust in that moment that that's sort of a bit of a kind of a lesson for you, maybe in that moment, to be like, stand in your power. You know what's right and what's wrong, and how it should feel and how it shouldn't feel. And so you need to kind of
Mhm.
sometimes be brave. It's
Are
hard.
you delivering messages to me or yeah, because
Maybe.
yeah, no, you are, because that's something that, especially 'cause so I started doing mediumship last year. I've always known, but I had a lot of fear around it.
Yeah.
And then yeah, I felt like I was getting some clients like that, and and it made me shut down and not want to do any readings at all.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like learning a bit about our boundaries, like you were talking about.
Mhm.
I know that initially, before I started to do mediumship, I had a lot of fear around not being able to be powerful enough, I guess, to create boundaries, especially with the spirit world. Like when
Mhm.
somebody's here in the physical, you can kind of like run away, or,
Yeah.
call the cops, like, just to
Yeah.
be totally, but in the spirit world, it's not the same, like the
No.
walls are, they can get through the walls. So it's not like it's a big deal.
Yeah.
Did you have to work through any fear, or like you were just talking about boundaries? Did you have to have
Mm.
boundaries not only with people that you were, reading for, but also with spirit?
Oh, absolutely. So I almost have a bit of like a on and off switch, kind of like how that medium said to me years ago, you should be able to turn on off like a light switch. I literally have that symbol for spirit, but mine's a door. So I picture a doorway, and when it's green and open, you're good to go, spirit. But when I close that door and it goes red, lights out, like we're good here. And I don't have anymore. I don't have spirits that visit me at night. I don't have them in my dreams. I don't walk around seeing spirits. Like that's just not a thing. And it's
Yeah.
because I've put into place all of these energetic boundaries where I'm like, this is when, like, I've had to create a portal in my home. I've had to, like,
Mm.
call in my grandfather to be the protector of that portal. And the portal is basically the door. Um, and I say certain things, I have rituals. Like, I've had to put a lot of, I guess, boundaries and energetic walls up, because I have some spirits on the other side who I don't necessarily want to ever connect with. So I've had to
Yeah.
create this for myself. This hasn't really just been for my clients, it's been for me to be able to get
Mhm.
peace and to feel safe and comforted and all those sorts of things. So yeah, I've had to do a lot of work in that space, and it's a lot when you don't know what you're doing
Yeah.
and you kind of figuring out what's going to work for you, because everyone's so different.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. But what you were talking about earlier too was having a mentor. So do you have a mentor still now, or where do you get some of your information from? Do you connect to your guides and kind of
Mm,
learn your ways of doing this? And what was coming to me as well when you were talking was, as we navigate through life, especially as we develop our spiritual gifts, we learn how to do things better,
yeah.
and I think that sometimes it can be frustrating because we want to run before we're walking, but
Mm,
sometimes things have to take their natural progression.
yeah.
We're not necessarily going to be at the end when we still have to learn to put all of these little things in place, like the boundaries or the portal or calling in our guards, and, whatever the case may be.
Mhm. Yeah, I definitely feel like and I also feel like we meet people at certain times that we need certain pieces of information too. Like I really heavily needed my mentor when I was starting. I was like every 5 minutes, what's this? What's that? What am I doing? What am I feeling? All those sorts of things. And now like I'll just touch base with her every now and then. Like it's not like it's not the same, and it's because I needed her for the foundation. But now that I'm starting to run, I'm like, now I need to trust
Yeah.
me. Now I need to be like, okay, that felt wrong. That feels right. Oh, I just spoke to that person. That sparked something in me. Like I'm feeling like everything now is a lot more intuitively guided, more so than my human brain telling me I need to learn certain steps or certain
Mm,
things. Now it's like things just pop in, or I just meet certain people and it just sort of solidifies things around me at certain points in time. So yeah, it's not so much that I'm seeking anything really out anymore. It sort of just
Yes.
happens.
Yeah. Well, I believe personally that we really have to learn to attune to our own truth and run everything through our own filter. And that's a big part of what you were talking about at the beginning of our chat as well, was really creating your dictionary. I mean, you didn't say that, but creating
Yeah.
your signs and your symbols that can connect. And people can sort of suggest things to you and you might go, "Oh yeah, that's a cool idea. I'll take that on and add it to my repertoire." But at the same
Yeah.
time, it's about finding what's going to work for you. And I think that's
Mhm.
not only a mediumship, is it? It's really a lot about being a soul in the human body as we navigate life here on earth.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so it just made me think of something. So I watch other mediums all the time. Like it's something that I love to do. I love to watch them work. I think it's really fascinating to see how we all work so differently.
Mm.
And I saw someone the other day who's like really quite a well-known medium, and he's really great with names. Right. So he just rips out names out of his ass, like with all these people that he's reading for. And he's like, I've got Mary and Margaret and David and friggin' everything. And they're like, oh my God, that is so weird. That's everyone's names. And I'm like, why don't I get names? I'm like, bloody hell, spirit. I'm like, I get all this other stuff. I never get any names. And so I started to like test it out. I was like, all right, well, when I'm reading for people, I'm like, give me a name, blah, blah, blah. And I don't trust the names I'm getting because I've never been a like name kind of medium.
Yeah.
And I'm asking my clients, I'm like, what was their name? And they're like, oh, this. And I look at my paper and it's not the name. I'm like, damn it. I'm like, bloody hell, spirit. What are all these names? Just give me something. And I'm like, well, maybe, you know what? Maybe I'm not meant to get names. Maybe it's just not a thing for me. I don't know. Maybe I'm just meant to pick up on other pieces of information. So I think sometimes we might look at others and we might think, oh, I want a little piece of that, or I want to do what they're doing or whatever. But if it doesn't align with you and it's not coming naturally and you're not sort of like being led that way, like, don't be so hard on yourself. Like
Yeah.
I'm really hard on me. I'm like, come on, girl. I'm like, you can do everything. And then when I can't
Yeah.
get things, I get really mad.
That's funny. You just reminded me of a story. So when I was first practicing my mediumship, I did like 40 readings for free or something before I started charging because I was still learning. And I remember I did this reading for this woman and I had like one of her loved ones in spirit. And so she was telling me about she was showing me like the person was in a hospital room and that they were like holding their hand and sitting by the bed and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, you're sitting on the right side of the bed, you're holding your hand. This is in the room. Like, these are the colors that were in there and blah, blah, blah. And because I was still practicing, I was still learning to discern when I get spirit, what side of the family they're on. Cause I really like to be able to deliver that so we can, cause sometimes people have two grandparents that have passed, for example.
Yeah.
And I got it wrong. I said something like, from the father's side of the family, everything else checked out, but that one thing
Yeah.
was not correct and they couldn't let it go. And so they
Yeah.
actually were saying to me, well, I don't remember holding the hand of anyone else in the hospital before. I said, no, it's definitely that person. I just got that one little piece of information wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess my question is to you, what responsibility does the sitter have in terms of a reading? If you're giving everything right, but the name is maybe not perfect, or
Yeah.
everything right, but there's one little piece of information. I mean, I guess you could say a skeptic could possibly use that as a reason avoiding whatever the
Mm-hmm.
reading is. But what are the roles and the responsibilities of the sitter as well? Is it to take everything at face value? Is it to come with an open heart and an open mind and to
Mm-hmm.
actually get clear on what you're intending to do? Or are you trying to prove the medium wrong?
Yeah. So I really feel like obviously we want people to be as open as possible because we're messengers, we're interpreting like, how we feel or sense the information can land differently for you. So I think it's definitely, especially with that particular sorry, I was so sick like 2 weeks ago. I can't get rid of this freaking cough. So if I'm
It's
coughing
okay.
throughout this, I'm sorry, guys. But yeah, so I think it's more um to take everything um as it is. And yes, if there's little bits of pieces of information that are like wrong or off, or you can't quite place it, don't hold on to that, because you're going to then change the whole energy of the reading. And the thing with me as like a medium, because there's probably people like listening to this who are aspiring mediums, who are mediums, spiritual, whatever you may be. I've learned to become a lot firmer with my mediumship. So I'm not sitting here anymore going, here's all the information. And then they're like, oh, yeah, all of that. I'm unsure of what you're saying because this piece didn't fit. And I'll be like, okay, if you remove that piece, does everything else make sense? I actually say that. And they're like, yes. Good. And I'm like, cool. I'm like, all right, well, let's stick with all of that, because obviously I've misinterpreted that piece. I still think it's this person because they've told me this, this, and this. And I'm like, hang on, I'm going to get something else for you that validates this. And then I'm like, does that make sense to them too? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, okay, well, we're with this person then. Like, I've learned to be very like, no, this is what I'm getting.
Yeah.
You're vibing with this. We're going to keep going on this train. So as a medium, you need to be steering it too. You can't let the sitter take over and then ruin your vibe. It's not a thing. So, and that's really hard to get that confident and to be in your power, but you have to, because if you let the sitter take over and then they're starting to like, you know, tell you all these stories and do all this stuff, like you lose all of the connection. So I think as a sitter, you have to be very open. But yeah, if you're sitting with somebody like me, if I get a little piece off, I'm kind of like, you know what? I'd rather be 99% right and take a chance than, you know, you have the 1% there's always going to be shit that's off. Always. There's going to be something that people are like, that didn't really fit. Maybe it makes sense later. Maybe it doesn't. Who cares? Like the majority of it is dead on. So we need to kind of just go with that energy. And that's why I'm like, you've got to stay with what is good. Because some people like to stay with the negative, where I'm very much, let's look at all the good stuff. And let's let the reading go in that direction. So sometimes you have to steer it.
Yeah. And I don't know if you've had this before, but like, I remember one time, and I was doing Facebook Live readings at this time. And this woman, I was doing a reading for her, and like these things are checking out. And then she goes, now there's a series of numbers.
Oh, Jesus.
What are the series are you getting the number? And I'm like, and in my head, I automatically went, I don't know what number it would have been, 143 or something like that. I went, and I said, no, I'm not. Like, I don't perform like that. You know what I mean?
Yes.
I can't know if that's going to be my head filling in the number because I just thought of a number, or whether that actually is delivered. And it could go either way. I could absolutely nail it. Could be the wrong number, then they discount everything else. Do you ever have people test you? Or there's one thing in particular, Lauren, that you really need to be picking up here?
All the time. It happens so often. It's this is not a party trick. Like, we are not sitting here. And you know what? Spirit have never, ever given me the correct answer to anything that the sitter has asked that is trivial. Ever. What's the name of this person? What's all the little stuff? Like, you know, if you're asking me a question that's like deep, like, you know, what did they think about that? That's different. But I'm talking about all this trick stuff where it's like, you know, what was the name of this? What was the number? What was the nickname they used to call me? What was like, where did we travel together in 2001? Like all of that trivial shit that really does not matter. That is, I never get those answers right. I'm sorry.
I said a special word before I called today and for this reading. What was the special word?
Yeah.
What was it?
No, it's not a thing. Like, I feel like that they almost like discount those things. They're like, are you serious? Like, I've given you like this thesis of information and all these really heartfelt messages that have landed. And then at the end of the reading, you're like, now, like, let's play a game. It's like Spirit are like, no, like, we are not playing here. This is not a thing.
Yeah, and I find like too, then people don't listen to anything. You're like, here's all the messages and everything to like set you up for the most successful life. And they're like, yeah, but what was the word that I said today?
I know.
What was the word? And you're like, dude, you just like, did you hear anything I said?
I sometimes I say no. If they're like, can you tell me this? And I'm like, no. And they're like, oh. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to just guess shit. Like, that's not how this works. And they're like, oh, okay. This is what I mean. You have to be really strong in this. Like, this is not for, you know, the fair weathered. Like, you have to really like be in your power. Otherwise, you're going to lose yourself in this. Yeah. Because people like to control shit. No?
That's something that I'm figuring out for myself. I'm taking a really long hiatus.
I get that.
like
I
6
get that.
months
Yeah.
break.
I don't blame you.
It's like, oh, I'm
It's a lot.
still figuring out stuff, I guess, for
Mhm.
myself. Yeah.
It's a lot. It really is. It's a lot of responsibility too. Like,
Yeah, that's right. That's
you've
how
got to
I,
word things a certain way or it doesn't land. And you have to pick up on
yeah.
things and do it in a way that feels like resonant to the person, that is aligned to them at the time. Like, it's almost like you have this, psychology kind of lens sometimes where you're giving people advice and it's heavy. So you
Yeah.
kind of can't take this lightly. That's why I really
Yeah.
do stand in my power a lot, because I'm like, this is huge. This isn't just like, oh, let's just, randomly pick a card and have fun. Like, sometimes you're telling people stuff that's like really heavy, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, you are. Are you good at boundaries in your own life, like your personal life and is that something that you've been working on, and have you always been good at that, or?
I haven't always been good at that, but now I'm like expert. It's kind of like,
Yeah.
try me kind of thing. So, and I've had
Yeah.
to, because I've had people in my life who've been really toxic and narcissists and people who just take, 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 take. And I've really had to sort of be really grounded and choose who I have in my life and give people energy when I feel like that we have reciprocal kind of relationships. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, you
yeah.
mean relationships are supposed to be give and take?
Those ones, they're rare, aren't they?
Yeah, but when you got them, you lock them down. That's what I do.
You do,
I'm like
absolutely.
locking that person
Yes.
down.
Yes.
What are some of your memorable readings or some of your favorite readings? I love hearing the stories like you were talking about when you're watching mediums. I just think it's
Mhm.
such an amazing, it's incredible. It's like there's this
Yeah.
magical world and we go, is this even happening? Is this even real? And it's just
Mhm.
wow. Is there one or two that comes to mind?
Yeah, I have so many that obviously I've done. I love when we get to connect with animals. It's the best.
Yeah.
So I've had many readings where I've connected with people's pets who are on the other side, and they just feel like little humans. Like, some of the stuff that they come out with is just so special and so funny. And I remember having this one reading where this couple was sitting in front of me and their dog came through, and he was showing me everything, where he used to sit, who used to come over, the fact that like one of their friends used to come over and they always used to drink wine. And I'm like, there is some woman that used to come over all the time and sit on the couch with him and like loved him so much. And like he was always on top of her. And I see her with a wine glass and they're like, oh my God, yes, that's like my best friend. She always comes around for a wine. I was like, that's so great that the dog is like, yeah,
No.
that lady that used to come around and she used to drink a lot. I just found it so funny and so
Yeah.
cute too. And
Yeah.
obviously he misses her. So that was a really beautiful message for that
Oh,
lady that used to come over. So that was really nice. Um, but I also love to connect with people who are still here. So I've had multiple readings where
mm,
I've channeled people who have dementia, who are nonverbal. And when I first started to do it, I was like, what do you mean this person's still alive? They're like, this literally sounds like my grandma who is in the aged care home right now. And she has everything you've been speaking about. And it's exactly her. I'm like, okay, so obviously, this is how I started to learn that souls travel. And when they're not able to communicate to the extent that we normally are able to here, their souls travel to the spirit world and back, and they're kind of in the in between, I guess we could say. So they have
yeah.
the ability to connect with me as if they are on the other side. So sometimes it can bring a lot of closure and comfort to the people that are watching, their family members thinking they're suffering, being in this body and having this mind that's not really operating the way we would want it to. That in actual fact, these people in this state are visiting their loved ones on the other side. So they're actually very much at peace in their own mind. It just doesn't look like it to us. So it's really helped a lot of my clients to
Mm.
understand.
That's so interesting. I was actually just talking about dementia this morning.
Mm.
And I learned from one of my other guests, and I can't remember even who I had this discussion with right now, but we were talking about how a lot of people with dementia actually have decided to kind of just let go and like
Yeah.
stop trying to control everything and in a way
Mm.
step back. And it
Yeah.
makes sense to me, like you're saying that that their soul would be free to travel because they're not so wrapped up in the humanness of
Hmm.
themselves and the human mind.
Yeah, they let go. And I think that they're very present when someone is with them, like in the room, if their family members come in and see them, or if they're with people. But when they're not and they just look like they're sleeping, or they're kind of just sitting staring into space, they're actually, their minds are wandering, and they're visiting people on the other side and understanding why things are going on the way that they are right now, and they're learning, and they're still doing all of the things that their soul is supposed to do here. It's just that now we're communicating differently.
Mm, that's so cool. I find it
Yeah.
very interesting to think about how the world will change over time, in the
Mm,
years to come, even as information is so readily available. And I don't
mm,
know about you, but I feel that a lot of people are opening up to the possibility that there could be something more than just we live, we die. Do you
yeah.
find that there's, even if they're not sure necessarily what it is, but that there's this
Mhm.
curiosity that's sparking?
I think so. And it's also really interesting to see people who in the past have never really been open to this, but now that they've experienced a loss for themselves, they're more
Yeah,
open to it now. I think that that's actually a trigger for most people. It's like I never
yeah.
really thought much of it. And then my dad died. And now I'm looking for signs everywhere. And now I'm hoping that there's more. And even though some people, it scares the hell out of them because they've never really thought anything about anything like this, some of the signs and symbols they get, or the readings that they receive, or whatever, it's just undeniable. Like, more people are being a lot more open to this. And it's really nice to see. And I think that it doesn't really matter what you believe in, just as long as you believe in something. Because I think it's
Mhm.
really nice to have faith in something more than what we see.
Yeah, yeah. And even just having that curiosity is enough, isn't it? To go,
Yeah.
okay, well, maybe this could be. And it's funny because when we learn a lot about, and meditation helps with this, that we almost have, someone explained it to me a little while ago. I always used to say two minds, but they're like, it's like a brain and a mind. Like the brain is like the ego, the human, and then the
Mm,
mind is like the soul part of us. There's
mm.
sometimes this awareness that comes in where we go, oh, that's a sign from blah blah blah, and then the brain will come in and go, that's impossible.
Yeah.
Obviously someone just left that there.
Yeah, it's true. It's everyone's,
Yeah.
oh, it's probably a coincidence. It's
Yeah,
probably a coincidence. I'm like, nothing is a damn coincidence. When we stop using that word, will be the best day of my life. It is not. Like, it is happening for a reason. And the
yeah,
thing is, the more that you acknowledge spirit, the more they do. So if you're like, hey, that's probably this person, they go, oh my God, she noticed.
yes, it
Cool. All
works.
right. I'm going to do that more now. Like, they want to play, they want to be in your life, they want to do the dance with you. So I think the more that you're open to it and you acknowledge, the more that they come. And this is why I also say to people, ask for signs. Ask. Don't just wait, and create your own signs. People are like, I don't have a
Yes.
sign. I don't know what to look out for. I don't know what to do. I'm like, create your own. Be like, okay, grandma, I want you to show me this. And it's rare and it's weird, but do it. And you
Yeah,
just wait. You will see it and you'll be like, oh my God, we now have a
yeah.
symbol. And then she'll show it to you more when you acknowledge that you saw it. Like, you know, you can talk to your loved ones. You can create this stuff on your own. I think it's a really powerful thing to do. And I've told many people to do this. And then I get messages like 2 days later going, I saw it, Jess. I saw it. I'm like, yes,
Yeah,
it's awesome.
yeah, exactly. It's just up for you to be present and notice it. That's the big part, because we're so
Yeah.
often in the future or the past or wrapped up in grief that we're missing the signs and the golden nuggets that our guides, our past over loved ones are giving us.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We do. We have to be a little bit more open, I guess, to how it might show up too. So it might not be
Mm.
what you think. You might be like, oh, okay, show me this particular bird. You might not see the physical bird, but you might be scrolling through Instagram and somebody's, symbol for their business is that bird. Like, that could be it.
Yes.
You kind of have to be open to the way that they might show you as well.
Yeah, that's perfect. I love that. So, just before we wrap up here, there are quite a few people that have sensitive children and they're not necessarily sure how to deal with this. And I remember even a couple years ago when we had a kid staying at our place. I remember I was learning about kids in spirit and like how you should make not kids in spirit, sorry, human children who can see spirit, just to
Yeah.
clarify that. And I remember it being, you're supposed to be supportive and, like encourage them. And then this kid said, "Oh, there's like a little girl in my room." And I'm like, "No, there isn't. There is not.
Ah,
There's like, I totally
so
failed, but
funny.
I like just freaked out for a second. Nope, there's no one there. It's
Oh my
okay. Like just
God. Just stop it.
yeah,
Oh my God, how funny.
that's not the way to do things. So what would be like maybe a way that we can encourage and support sensitive children, especially I guess when sometimes children aren't really like used to the boundaries thing quite yet.
Oh, for sure. So I think it is about being open to hearing what they have to say, to trusting what they say to. I think that if something becomes scary, like if they're frightened or there's fear-based stuff there, like I think that it's really important that you teach them to talk to the spirits and
Good
say
one.
things like, I'm scared now, please stop. Like, stop, you're scaring me, no more. Like, actually communicate, because on that really basic level, majority of the time spirit do stop. It's only in those like rare cases that, like, you have a bit of a darker energy that's not playing. But if there are those, like, if it doesn't stop after they've acknowledged the spirit and asked them to, you really just need to do a lot of cleansing stuff. So I would do
Mhm.
sage, palo santo, like cleanse the room, ask to remove any negative fear-based energies, any spirits that don't belong there or are keeping your child up at night. And then also, for those of you who follow me on my page, I've discovered the lime hack. So you can cut up a lime, cut it in half, and put the two halves in a dish in their room and set the intention for the limes to clear the energy and to make only positive vibes in that space, and the limes just soak up all the bad stuff. So if we've had so much success with so many kids now sleeping like 12 hours a night, like it's just absolutely amazing. No more monsters, no more hauntings, no more conversations about bad spirits. So yeah, jump over and have a look at some of my reels and the success we've had. It's pretty cool.
And what do you do with the limes after? You do not eat them. You don't put them into a cocktail.
No, you don't eat them. Although people have. People are like, oh my God, I left the limes and my child's eaten it. Does it mean they now are the devil? I'm like, no. I'm like, don't worry, it's all fine. It's so good. But no, I just chuck them. So I have them in the room for about a week. I do like week at a
Okay.
time, and then I chuck them and then I put them back in. I just like to have them there all the time. It just kind of is that, protective kind of
Mm.
energy, kind of like you would with anything
A salt
spiritual.
dish. I often do like salt in water, and you can have the salt. But I have a
Yeah.
lime tree outside, so it
Huh.
seems to me that I've got like cleansing abilities on tap.
Yeah, I love that for you. So good.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I would definitely try it out. And it smells good too. It's not like you're putting
Yeah.
something gross in your
My
room.
partner's going to come home. There are going to be limes in every room. What's
I love that. Oh, how funny. But you can diffuse lime essential oil as well. That helps. So anything lime
Yeah.
is really good.
Okay. And not, what about lemon? Because I always assume lemon and limes were interchangeable. Are they not?
The lemon doesn't work as well. There's something
Okay.
about the
Cool.
limes. Yeah, we've tried lemon. Multiple people have tried it and they're like, nah, I had to like piff them and just get the limes. So there's something about it. Super
Wow, that's
cool.
so neat. Awesome. All
Mm.
right, cool. Well, listen, is there anything that I didn't ask you, Jess, that you wanted to talk about, that you wanted to, maybe a thought that you wanted to leave our listeners with? I'd love to hear that now. And also, how can people get a hold of you? You did mention your Instagram page. I know you have a podcast as well. I'll
I
put links to
do.
that in the show notes.
Yeah. So, you know what? The biggest message that I have for you is that my life really did change when I took a chance on myself. So I think sometimes it's really important to take a chance on you. And if you've been thinking about doing something for a little while and you've just never done it, or maybe you're thinking about being a medium and you're scared and you don't know, do it. Take a chance on you. Like, what do you got to lose, kind of thing. I think that we need
Mm.
to be a bit more courageous in this life. Um, in terms of how you can connect with me, I nearly finished and now I'm starting to choke. Okay, so you can connect with me on Instagram or TikTok. It is Jessica Lynne Mediumship. I've also, as you mentioned, have a podcast called Talk Spirit to Me. We're number 2 on the Apple charts now. I can't believe it. So cool. So
Awesome.
yeah, we're on Apple and Spotify, so you can listen there. And my website is jessicalynnemediumship.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. I really enjoyed our time together.
So did I. Thank you.